Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast, presented to you in conjunction with Property of Zach. I am your host, Ray Harkins, and we're at episode number 23. We are inching closer to that. I don't even know, 25th anniversary? I don't even know what you call that, but whatever. I think I'd have to look up what you get a wedding anniversary for a 25th. But clearly, 25 episodes is not 25 years, and I really shouldn't be making that big of a deal out of it. In any event, let's get some business out of the way. I mentioned to you Property of Zach. They are one of our new partners on this show. PropertyofZach.com. Go visit that website. You will be able to find the latest news, tour dates, release dates, whatever you're looking for in regards to independent music, you will be able to find that there. And the reason that I love this site so much is the fact that not only does he report on that stuff, when I say he, I mean Zach. So he takes that normal stuff, but then, the editorial content that he's able to sprinkle on top of that, either from bands doing like tour blogs or the more in-depth interviews that he does with bands over email or phone or whatever he's doing. I like it because you can tell that he really pays attention to what's happening within the music scene with that particular band, and whether or not he does a ton of research, that doesn't really matter. It's the fact that he's able to kind of get interesting and compelling answers from these people. So check out that site because I am excited to be partnered up with them. So there you go. Two other things. Review the show on iTunes. Go to iTunes, obviously, the iTunes store, find the 100 Words podcast, and stop fucking around and subscribe to the damn show. I do promise you, I've said this in previous episodes, but I promise you that whether or not you give a shit about the person who I'm bringing in as a guest, that's not the most important and compelling component of it. It's the fact that we will have a interesting and hopefully enlightening conversation that you'll be able to either apply directly to your own life as far as, experiences within independent culture are concerned, or are just simply an interesting story. So subscribe. Secondly, review. Give us 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, whatever you feel the show is worth. That'll take you 4 seconds. If you want to feel really ambitious, you can review the show as far as a written review is concerned. I really do read them. I compulsively read them. I check every 2 or 3 days to be like, hey, has anybody posted something new? Just because that's kind of my personality. So anyways, do that stuff and I can give you digital high fives. And last but certainly not least, visit the website, 100 Words Podcast. I update it pretty regularly, a few times throughout the week, of cool shit I've stumbled across, whether it's music, movies, whatever the case may be, because a lot of people have asked me to do that and say, like, hey, what new music have you listened to recently? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what all of us within the independent music world, so to speak, we like when our friends or people we trust recommend shit. So go there and you'll be able to find all that stuff, and you can follow us on Twitter and all that other fun stuff. So anyways, this is a long conversation that I had for this episode with Ryan Russell. He is the well-known photographer, rock photographer. I don't even know how he likes to be appropriately labeled, but he has made his living as a photographer, and he also does a website called Nervous Energies, which is basically taking a band and putting them in front of a camera and having them do their songs acoustically. Just gives you a really stripped down version of those songs, and usually it's exclusive from that perspective. So I tripped across him via that website, and I was already familiar with his photographing work, but then once I kind of started to look into him a little bit more, I've always been a huge fan of photography. I was really into it when I was in high school. I actually was a big nerd and the high school yearbook photographer. Took photo and all that stuff. I was always pretty terrible at it. I just didn't have that eye, so to speak. But I've always really respected the medium. And when I'm very gray, or black and white. I wouldn't be gray about it because then I would not really care. But I've always been very black and white with photographers. People either take good photos or they take bad photos. They're not really people that fall in the in-between medium as far as I'm concerned. And Ryan takes really good photos. Like, they actually compel me to look at more photos that he's done from previous bands. They convey emotion. They do everything that a photo is supposed to do. So yeah, I was really interested in kind of picking his brain about that, and just kind of more stuff to be discussed. I had never met this dude in my life until I hit him up over email and asked him to be on the show, and he politely agreed. And then come to find out, we've have a ton of similar experiences and same friends, and the fun stuff that keeps us involved in independent culture and music. So yeah, here you go, my interview with Ryan, and hope you enjoy. Thanks.
I find, especially with independent music, it's like people don't just do one thing. Like, do you notice that as well, where it's just like you're doing like 15 different things at once?
Yeah, I definitely notice that. I think the ones who figure out how to not do that sometimes end up being the ones that are better off. But
yes, sort of like the what is the saying? Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely apply that to myself.
You're like, I'm 70% talented at everything I do.
More like 30%. I won't go a full 70.
Got it. But yeah, so that was, like I said, that's kind of where I first tripped onto your stuff, and do you like that feeling of like being able to basically control your own stuff and sort of execute that vision?
I really do. And it's, even speaking in a broader sense, like, it's always very interesting. You just shared a personal aspect to your version of how you saw my work. But like, I've been doing, quote, band photos for like 12 years. And it's crazy all along, like, those 12 years, like, people sharing stories of being like, well, this is where I found out about your work. And it's really cool to know that, like, it's always great to be like, oh, I know you from, whatever big band. And, but like, if it was something that happened like 8 years ago, you're just like, oh man, nobody's finding anything else new though.
Yeah, you're like, that was my touchstone. I topped there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm glad to know that like people are still like finding things that are, like they're seeing the new stuff and they're finding out about the new stuff, and then everything in the past is just kind of, building from there once they find all that stuff out too. So
yeah, it's kind of like I definitely equate it to how obviously people get introduced to independent music, where it's like an onion. You start to peel away the layers and you're just like, oh, like there's some depth to this, and this person has been doing this thing for a prolonged period of time or whatever. It's like yeah, it's the same idea. So you mentioning that you were from the South, were you born and raised in the southern United States of America?
I have lived every day of my life in Birmingham, Alabama.
That's yeah, and obviously because of that, you feel a very strong sense of Southern pride, I imagine.
I'm not going to call it Southern pride because that's like opening the door to be like, oh, you're a racist.
I know, that's why I phrased it as such.
But I definitely enjoy Southern culture, and like I don't really, not that I vocalize this, but like I'm very interested in like the civil rights movement, and so like it's really cool to be able to know where you can, if you hear about some story of something happening back then, you can probably drive an hour and go see it.
Yeah,
or less, because Birmingham was definitely like one of the hotbeds for all that, and so growing up, like I've been to the 16th Street Baptist Church that was bombed, and been to the Selma. I mean, like literally, like a week ago, I went to the Selma Bridge where they did the march for Sunny Bloody Sunday, and so,
Wow.
um, like it's kind of cool. I definitely love it here, but there's obviously other places in the country that I also love and appreciate for their version of their culture as well.
Yeah, what I find, I think you hit on something where because I've always lived on the West Coast. Like was born in Vegas, but essentially Southern California is where I called my home. The traveling anywhere outside of California, and obviously once you start to get to the South and the East Coast, there's history. Whereas, like in California, if we have a building that's like 150 years old, like we're pretty excited about that. But so many places in the South and East Coast, it's like, oh yeah, you see 150-year-old buildings all the time because we're just older.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, yeah, it's like, obviously, like you were saying, it's sort of ground zero for that huge cultural change within, our country. So that's pretty cool that you're able to just, like you said, drive an hour and see a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and it's when you grow up here, like, we, obviously, I think every state, I'm sure, does this, but like, you have Alabama history at certain grades, and even then, like, it's cool for them to, like, when you spend an entire year like talking about the state that you live in, like you can get into the real detailed specifics of things that like that you didn't know growing up here, but it wouldn't, like, people who don't live here wouldn't know about it either because it just gets too specific.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get those little details, I feel like that it helps tell the story so much better.
Yeah, no, that's totally true.
Not just doing the broad strokes. So
Yeah, for sure. And so, as you were being raised in the South, like, what did your parents do, and what was this sort of, do you have brothers and sisters, and sort of the family life that you grew up in?
my mother was a teacher for, it's got it like over 30 years at the same school.
Wow.
And she taught second grade.
Okay. Did you go to that school?
I was at school for the first 2 years, and it sucked because anytime I got in trouble, like she would be all about like, yeah, paddle them, because I'm 31 years old. I don't know people who are like 5 and 10 years younger than me, like what they grew up in elementary school. But if you did something bad, you got paddled.
Yeah.
And so, there wasn't any detention or any of that stuff. And so she would be like, yeah, like teach them a lesson,
Sure.
because she knew like, she knew the authoritativeness of that, like,
Yeah.
would like, be more, do more good than harm.
Yeah,
So,
it would have an impact on you. Like, I don't care what your opinion is on corporal punishment. It will have an effect, period.
yeah. And and looking back, like it's not, I could see somebody being like, oh, it scarred me. Like, it's just downright funny because the stuff that I got in trouble for was like hilarious stuff. Nothing bad,
What did you do to get in trouble in first and second grade?
I don't know if I want to talk about that.
That's fine. We will gloss over that.
Let's just say there was definitely like some sand being thrown at people.
Okay.
In one case where it was definitely like not fun for the other person.
Which is it's okay. These things, you're young. You have no idea what you're doing.
And and that sounds really like vague and like, he threw sand. What does it matter?
Yeah.
Trust me, it was bad.
All right. Well, yeah, we won't do anything to incriminate you, especially because you obviously live in your same community. So, yeah, what your mom taught school, and then what did your dad do?
He's done two like different but similar things. Like he was married before he met my mom, but like he's older. He was born. Oh man, this is terrible.
It's okay.
I think like early 40s even.
Oh, okay.
But he was in the Korean War, and you know, he did that. Like he lied and joined when he was like 15 or 16, and like he did that. And then when he got discharged from, you know, like once the war was over, he was a cop for like 20 years.
Wow.
And I think about, you know, these numbers may not line up because I'm kind of just going off the top of my head, but I think in the 70s, when he met my mom, he moved to Birmingham because he's from Iowa, which is kind of funny. The fact that, like, if I tell anybody that he's from Iowa, they're like, all right, that's why you don't have a Southern accent.
He influenced you that way.
But he's way more redneck than my mom is. But he basically was in like full-time Air National Guard when he moved down here. So he basically went from Army to police force to, like, you know, Air National Guard.
Wow.
And he was like military police and Air National Guard, you know, until he retired when I think it's 60 they require you to retire. So,
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like I mean, obviously, you put those sort of archetypes of what an authoritative father job could be, and those are like
you have the cop and the military mixed into one.
Yeah, totally. Did you find him to be like super strict and hard on you?
He definitely wasn't like, you know, like you have that there's always that joke of like, oh, your bed's not made the right way.
Yeah.
He definitely wasn't like that. It was just more so like, you know, from where he grew up and from, you know, the time period he grew up, like he doesn't understand. He knows what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's very well aware. And so, like, but, like, for him, like, he doesn't get how I can make a living at it and, like, those kind of things. Because both of my parents, although they, like, you know, obviously they've owned CDs in their lifetime.
Right.
There are, you know, a couple CDs, more so cassettes and LPs. They're not, like, into music at all.
Right.
And so it's one of those things where it was just kind of basically, like, him, you know, he wasn't. It was just kind of, once he understood something, he was cool with it.
Yeah.
You know?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was talking to a friend the other day, and the concept that a lot of our parents have to sort of grasp is, especially with like everything that we're kind of involved in, essentially is viewed to them as a hobby. You know, it's like, how, like photography, like, oh, that's a hobby. Like, yeah, of course there are people that do make a living of it, but, you know, they're taking pictures for supermodels in Vogue. And so being able to reconcile the idea that, like, oh, this hobby, like, my kid's able to make a living out of this, like, I don't understand. It's like, that doesn't equate, you know?
Yeah, the really funny part about that is, like, you know, they're both definitely down. Like, I don't want to portray it like they're not, but
Right.
like they still like, oh, why don't you get a job, you know, doing computer stuff? And it's like, they don't even know what they're trying to say. They just know that I know how to use a computer. And so they're just like, oh, you should do some computer stuff. And so
That's so good.
but it's really funny, like, when certain things have come out, you know, like over the past couple of years, like, there's been like certain things that would happen where it would be the recognition or something big, and they would, you know, you talk to them that day and they're like all about photography, you know, surprisingly.
That's what was the one project in your mind over the past few years where it was like, that was the case, that particular day they were like, oh yeah, my son is a photographer?
I definitely, you know, this is gonna sound weird, but like they love Paramore.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've never heard a Paramore song in their entire life.
Yeah.
But they were just like, you know, one day when Riot went platinum, you know, the band sent me a record, and when that showed up at the door, like, they were just like, what have you ordered? It had sent to this house, because it was so big, and they were just like, you know, you shouldn't be spending money on, they thought it was like a table or something.
Oh my god, amazing.
And so they went ahead and like opened it before I got there, because they were just like, like, how is he even going to get this in his car to back to his apartment? And they saw it, and they told like all of their friends, and so none of their friends even remotely come close to even knowing who the band is. And I'm just like, why? Like, you're telling them about a band that your friends don't even know about, and you're also like broadcasting like you guys hate photography. Like, why are you even like triumphing this right now?
That's so
obviously they don't hate it, but like I totally, even today, like even 2 days ago I was there, they were just like, oh, you know, like I heard there's some cool jobs at such and such business, installing like internet service. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? You don't even know that. You don't even know what that means.
Right. That's so amazing that they still constantly suggest drop these not so subtle hints at you in order to, hey, what, Ryan, maybe you can get a real job one of these days.
Oh, dude, and the funniest thing, and I like, this is my favorite story of all, and I'm so glad that I get to tell it. I graduated in high school in '99, and I graduated college in 2006. Like, it's got to be like 4 months after I graduated, I had my first photo in Rolling Stone, like in the proper magazine, not online. Mm-hmm. The same week, an article that like my friend had written because she needed to like write an article for like the school paper came out, and they flipped out about the school paper because they were like, oh man, that's the university. And I'm like, you don't even understand, like, this is my first Rolling Stone photo, like. And so I'm pretty sure they threw the Rolling Stone in a drawer, and then I think they like gave copies of the student paper to like their friends and stuff.
Oh, that is incredible.
And so, because like my mom, I went to the University of Alabama at Birmingham, okay. And that's where my mom went to. And so like for her, like it legitimizes it because she understands that that's like a thing, you know? And so like she's never read a copy of Rolling Stone, you know? I mean, she knows about it, but like she doesn't understand that that's like an achievement that someone that, or, you know, someone like me, or actually me, you know, wanted to do their whole lives. And so
that's awesome. That yeah, you're like, the thing that you should probably be more excited about is the thing that obviously you, like you said, you put in the drawer.
Yeah.
So and you have siblings as well, or no?
I have one older sister, mm-hmm. who she's married, has 2 kids. Like, she's totally living, but she's basically like, and became a teacher. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, she's basically living my mom's life, and she lives in Tampa. She doesn't live in Birmingham.
Got it.
And like, you know, like obviously we grew up together, but like we aren't like we're not like close or anything, you know?
Sure. You're polar opposite. Like, your life has led you down 2 completely different paths, and you know, when you see each other, it's like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I was definitely like, and I was the younger brother, and so like every person listening to this right now, like, oh, they must not get along, you know? We don't not get along, but like, you know, growing up, it was definitely like we had our like sibling battles. So
of course, yeah, you had this sort of typical older sibling versus younger sibling rivalry.
It's definitely like, you know, oh, you're the younger child, so you're getting spoiled, so I'm gonna not like you. But the funny thing is, her, like, she has 2 daughters, and the 2 daughters like love me, and like they're the best. Like, you know, I'm so stoked when I get to see them. Uh-huh. So it's like this weird thing where like you're closer to her kids than you are her.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense because it's like, you know, I'm sure they view like you and you know, you're sort of the independent lifestyle that you live as far as you know, what you do for a profession, but then, you know, you're just like down to goof around with them just because that's essentially what we've done our whole lives.
Yeah, and I definitely think that like a lot of people, like a lot of their relatives and stuff, like are all very like by the book, adult minded, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, I still, later today, I'm probably gonna look up some Transformers on eBay,
Yeah.
and so, like,
Yeah.
I treat them like I'm an adult, but I treat them like kids who just want to have fun, and so like we'll do silly stuff. I don't think, like, I know nobody on my side of the family, like, they all love my nieces, but like they're adults and they're a lot older, so they're not like, they're not going outside like,
Yeah, let's go to the playground
with them, and like having like playing with them like a kid would play with another kid, instead of playing it's always like adult showing a kid like, all right, we're gonna go to the zoo and look at this stuff, so it's kind of like,
Yeah.
they know I'm down.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's awesome that you're able to have that relationship with them. So as you were coming up and like, going into high school, kind of a two-part question. One, when did sort of independent music come into your life? And two, what was your high school experience like? Were you the yearbook photographer?
No. But thing is, like, that whole thing is a funny story. But independent music for me, like, the very first music I ever heard, like, in the mornings, like, kindergarten, first grade, I would always ride my mom to school because we went to the same school, and it was like 30 minutes away from our house. So she'd be getting ready, and I would watch like cartoons, but like I also watched MTV. So the very first song I ever heard in my entire life was Metallica 1.
Oh.
And like, still to this, like, I'm not like a big metal guy, but I still love that song. And so, this was like I was in kindergarten in '87. Like, this is like showing my age so much in this interview.
That's all right. That's all right. We're the same age, so it's okay.
Are you really? All right. Well, then, are you 81?
I was born in '80, so I think I'm maybe a little bit older than you.
Wow. Okay. Now you're the old guy.
Yeah, I am the old guy.
And so, I listened, like, they used to show like Ramones videos and Cure videos and Clash videos. So I was always into those bands growing up. I really didn't like, I liked music, but I didn't like go out and buy CDs all the time and stuff. Like, I would listen to the radio and whatever else. But it definitely was when Nirvana Nevermind came out that, like, that was the first time where I understood, not that that's independent, but I understood that, all right, CDs come out on a certain date, and you can go to the store on that date and buy it.
That's very revelatory.
Yeah, and so like you understood that, like, all right, like, this is a thing. It's not just like it's not things just floating around. Like, I think my first album ever was Def Leppard Hysteria that I bought on a cassette tape at Kmart.
Nice.
But Nirvana Nevermind came out. I bought it the day it came out. I can't remember if it's 91 or 92.
Yeah.
I think it's 92.
Yeah, you're right.
And like, I went to a local music store here that I ended up shopping at for a while, and bought it, and it was cool. And I never really understood the difference. I never understood what like an independent label was until I got into Green Day. Like, I got into Green Day, like when Dookie came out and all that kind of stuff. But when I loved Green Day, girl. I mean, it's still probably in my top 5 favorite bands of all time. And I like the new stuff too. But when I understood that they had albums that came out before Dookie that you can't really find at the normal stores, like, that was, so like Lookout Records was the very first label that I ever understood, like, all right, this is an independent label, and this is a major label.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that, because I had a totally same experience where it like didn't compute in my mind that something would have existed before Dookie. I honestly kind of viewed those things as like, these are like undiscovered gems. Like, how did these even come to exist? Like, I still didn't grasp the concept of like an independent record label, because I think these were just things that were like this secret world that you just tripped on.
Yeah, and definitely between Nevermind and Dookie, like, I really liked Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream. Like, I was a huge Oasis fan in high school, and so like once you understood the concept of there might be albums that you don't know about from bands, like I started like looking for stuff.
Nice.
And like even Oasis, like I remember like going, we had a local record store called Magic Platter, and the guy who owned it is a guy named Don Van Cleve, who some of the older people would, there was this thing called Sims, and basically they were the ones who got promos for whatever labels an artist into record stores, so that when you went in there, like if you saw an end cap or displays, like Sims was the company that did it.
Yep, I worked at an indie record store. I know that extremely well.
So Sims is based out of Birmingham,
Yep.
and he owned Magic Platter before he started Sims, and I would go in that store and he would have everything. Like you could go in there, you would see all the CD singles, and so I got really into like import singles and all that kind of stuff. And so like, you know, it kind of spiraled up from there. And then, you know, my first label that I ever loved that was like completely independent was Fat Records. Like, you know, Lagwagon is always, you know, a super important band to me. Like, you know, Lagwagon, Strung Out, No Use for a Name. And so they were the first label. Like, you know, everybody has that label, like when they were growing up, where it might be Victory or Bridge 9 or whoever. Mine was Fat Records. So
Nice. That's cool. So, and this was all kind of coming into your view as you were going through high school. And what was your, you know, did you enjoy high school? Was it one of those things where you kind of just couldn't wait to get out, or?
I mean, I enjoyed it. It definitely, you know, the high school that I went to, I'm sure, I don't know how it is in California, but, you know, there's a lot of cities that have it like I'm about to describe it. Like we had it where, you know, it's the whole white flight thing where, you know, people, especially in Birmingham, like, you know, growing up in the 80s and 90s, like, it would be like this weird racial thing where like you would have like really white schools and then you would have really African American schools. And so if your school, like, you know, they started like busing in people from like the schools, and like I don't want to call it the city schools or any of that kind of stuff, but like they would integrate students that shouldn't be going to your school only because their school was overcrowding. And so I started to like basically, so like the school that I went to was predominantly white. And then as it got to junior high and high school, that's when the busing in started happening. And, you know, like I'm sure somebody's listening to this, are like, oh, you sound like a racist. But I'm completely for that. Like, why should people have to go to a school because it's overcrowded just because they live near it? Like, you know, bring kids in. It's cool. Like, people need to be around people they're not around, you know, regardless if it's a race difference or if it's a, you know, religious belief difference or whatever, any kind of differences. People need to be around different people because that's how shit needs to work.
Yeah, it broadens their own cultural horizons, and they understand like, oh, everybody isn't like me.
Yeah, and so basically, you know, the later years of high school, it ended up being like just more awkward because, you know, the staff at the school that I went to started like thinking they had to like crack down on like certain things. And so, you know, we didn't have uniforms, but it's like, all right, you're not allowed to, you know, you have to tuck in your shirts all day. And it's just like, are you kidding me? Like what, like you think somebody's like hiding a gun at all times under their pants and you tucking it in is going to like, you know, show that they're not carrying one? Like that's insane.
Right.
So for like my last 2 years of high school, I left and went to a different school because I basically was just like, this school is insane. I'm not going to go here anymore. And the actual education level there was terrible. But
Got it.
You know, I'm rambling at this point. So like,
yeah, no, I understand.
I'm going to compromise it here, so that way maybe this will make sense. But it's like, I really enjoyed high school. I was definitely, you know, for people who have seen me, like I'm like 6'5". I look like a football center. And so like when you're the big guy growing up, like there's always those people that fuck with you. But, you know, at the same time, I'm 6'5". I can pretty much,
Yeah.
you know, fucking destroy anybody in high school that wanted to fuck with me. And so
Did people, like, because you were such a tall dude and obviously like a large presence, did people, were you a target in some ways?
that was like the nicest way you could have said that. A large presence.
Well,
No, I get it. No, but I'm saying that's hilarious. But not I'm not going to say that was a target, but it's kind of like one of those things where, you know, and I swear this is true for anybody. And so anybody listening, if you had this experience, I want you to email me and be like, yo, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Good call.
But it's kind of like when you're not a target, but at the same time, like, if you were to do something that's stupid, like, you get told it's stupid twice as much as a normal person would.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so I definitely think that, like I'm very, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm like ultra competitive when it comes to photography. And it's definitely because of, like, you know, growing up in high school, I was relatively smart. I was in like the gifted program and did like AP classes and all that kind of stuff. But, like, you know, like there was nothing that I was like the best at. And so I never owned a camera in my entire life until the second year of college.
Wow.
I never took art classes. I never did any kind of art. Like I did web design back in, like, you know, 97, like around that era when, like, you know, you use Front Page, or people who are really old remember like the AOL member pages.
Sure. GeoCities.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, like, web design was not an art major. It was a computer science major, because it was more about programming than it was design back when, you know, before websites and all this became so huge. So my first 2 years of college, I was a computer science major, and you had to take at least one art elective. So I took a photography class, and I did this. You know, this is probably going to answer a question that you might have asked later on, but
No, I see where you're going.
You know, I did a website for a band in Birmingham called Haste. You know, and everybody's like, Haste today? And I'm like, no, it's Haste.
Dude, I worked with that band because I worked at Century Media.
Did you? All right, do you know Tom Bigrowitz?
Of course, Tom B. Yeah, great dude.
All right, this is some good times right now. Haste is from Birmingham. I did their website starting with the album When Reason Sleeps.
Okay.
Up until the end of the band. And so, you know, I was getting in this photography class late. It was basically going to be a fall 2000 class. And I started doing the website summer 2000. And they were like, you know, we don't really have any content. And I was like, hey, I'll buy a camera. I'm going to need it for this class anyways. And I'll just come shoot a couple photos at the shows so that way we have more content. And so, you know, doing that was it. That was the start of the whole thing. I literally bought a camera because I did a website for this band and I needed photos for it. And I was just beginning photography class.
I love how it's like most people have this sort of, I needed to do this, so I did this. Like that's just like the simplest explanation for things that, you know, you end up doing and you end up obviously doing for a long time. It's just like, well, I needed this, so I did it myself.
Yeah, and it's, you know, like, I mean, there was plenty of people, like, you know, Haste was, you know, up and coming at the time when they were coming out. And, you know, so there are definitely people who shot photos of them, but it was kind of like I lived in Birmingham and they're from Birmingham. And so, like, you know, I remember sitting in the studio, Synchromesh Studios, where all the Haste records were recorded, and you know, photographing them, you know, writing that record, and, like, you know, I had no idea really what I was doing.
Right.
I just knew that the exposures kind of worked, so I was like, all right, cool. And so it just, you know, it for 2 years, I would say from like summer 2002 till basically Fugazi played Birmingham in March 2002. From summer 2000 to March 2002, I only did Haste photos for like 2 years. So my very first band to shoot that's not Haste, and my very first photo pass is Fugazi.
That's a pretty legit photo pass.
And funny enough, Tom Bagerwitz is friends with them, and that's how I got to do it, because they were playing Birmingham. I had worked with Tom on tons of Haste stuff, obviously, because he was the designer for all the records. And he was just like, hey, you should really shoot. I knew of Fugazi, but until like 2001, when Tom played me Fugazi, like a couple months before they were going to play here, like I didn't really listen to him. Mm-hmm. I knew Minor Threat, but I didn't know Fugazi. And so like, I definitely feel like that I appreciated it at the time, but like ever since then, it only doubles every year of like, holy shit, that was your first photo pass.
Yeah.
And so like now I appreciate it immensely.
Right. In retrospect, you're like, that was a very special thing to happen for my first sort of run.
It's really weird to have, I mean, like, I think most people that do tour or like work for bands, like they love collecting passes. So the fact that I have a Fugazi laminate that I use, like, because Fugazi is the band that, like, why do they even have laminates? But like the fact that I have one is kind of insane,
Right. You should just continually wear that, like, on any tour you're on, just as a conversation piece.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of reasons for people to like talk shit about me anyway. So I'm sure that I don't want to add that one to the mix.
That's awesome.
Talk about all the fucking bands he shot,
Yeah, who cares? When did you, in your own mind, when did things, again, kind of a two-part question, became real for you, where it's like, I mean, maybe it was getting a platinum record from Paramore, and then when was the, even though you did graduate college, and obviously your parents still want you to get another job, but did you ever have to have that conversation with your parents where it's like, hey, I'm not going to be doing this because I am pursuing this career in photography?
That conversation happens weekly.
That's what happened.
And it has been for like the past 8 years.
It's an ongoing conversation.
Oh, dude, totally. Because, like, and it's just so funny that, like, they've, like, met bands and stuff. And, like, like, I've had bands come over to the house because, they live, like, 30 minutes out. Like, they basically, my mom, like, on her, like, last year or two of teaching, she, like, built a house. She wanted to live out where she had been teaching for 30 years, which was 30 minutes away, because she was more in tune with that community than the one that we were living in. And so she built a house there. And so, but she lives, like they live in this awesome place where, like, it's kind of like, it's not in the boonies, but it is. And so, like, there's tons of photo spots around it. So I've brought bands to the house because we were like, because that's where we're going to meet up to go do photos. And like, it's just kind of funny. Like, even though she sees these bands coming over, like,
it's still not real.
Dude, they want me to be a wedding photographer so bad. They're just, oh my God, you're going to make the real money doing weddings.
That's incredible. And so what in your own mind, like when was this sort of realist moment for you where it's like you felt like the switch had proverbially flipped, that was like, okay, like, I guess I should view myself as this legitimate photographer, or that when I go overseas, that on my customs form, I need to write photographer?
So basically, like, my degree was in graphic design, and I always thought that I was going to do graphic design and album art and all that kind of stuff, and the photos were kind of like, all right, and cool, I can kind of shoot some photos. Before, like, first 2 years were computer science. So when I switched major to graphic design, I basically had to do 4 extra years in that, and because I took a bunch of extra classes. Because I took all the photo classes, even though it wasn't my degree, just because I knew that I needed them. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't go towards, like, I probably took 6 photo classes, but only needed 3. And so it ended up prolonging myself to the 6-year plan. But before I graduated, like, I was already getting magazine covers and stuff. And it's kind of surreal when, like, you know, and it might be a little easier for people now where it's not that big a deal, but like, you know, my first magazine cover was Queens of the Stone Age.
That's huge.
And it was for Decibel. And I didn't know what I was doing. Like the number one thing, and I hope that you have a story that's like this. Like, when MySpace was like still cool and like not just insane amounts of people were on it, you could look up people in bands or editors at magazines and add them. And if your photos were on your MySpace page, they would contact you. So I got my first cover with Decibel because I added Albert, who's the editor. He saw like a bunch of photos that I had shot, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to go shoot Queens of the Stone Age in 2 days, opening for Nine Inch Nails?" Sure, let's do that. You know, like,
that's incredible. No, I mean, I knew that obviously, like, contact, it was easier to kind of weed through that from the, you know, that perspective, but that's amazing. Yeah. And so did you was the cover that you did for Decibel the one with like Josh Homme like smoking a cigarette? Or
it is. That's it.
Dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's a
and that, like, even to this day, like, you know, and like I don't think I've done much with Decibel since, like, and I'm super stoked that like I got to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But I feel like that, man, I like the way that I probably went about it. They were probably like, "Oh my God, what have we gotten ourselves into, this kid?" Because I remember, like, I mailed them, like, I was like, "All right, cool, I'll mail you the photos." And so I mailed them 4x6 photos with negatives. I was like, "Here you go." And it's like, that's not how it works.
They're like, "Could you please make something easier for us to use?"
But, you know, so that was like the first, that was like a big milestone. When I graduated in 2006, and I, you know, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. 2 weeks after I graduated, Century Media emailed me, and they were like, "Hey, we want you to fly to Miami to shoot Diecast." And
you're blowing my mind right now. Holy shit.
It's really weird. Dude, I remember when Abacus was started, all that stuff.
Dude, that was me.
Really, was it?
Yeah, I was working at Century Media, and then one morning my boss woke up and was like, "Hey, so you're going to do this whole Abacus thing with a few other staff members, and then here you go." And it was like, holy fuck, I'm 22. I don't know what I'm doing.
So, okay, touching on that, I had, like, when Haste When Reason Sleeps came out,
yeah,
one of my first live photos is in the record. It was just like, they had like a bunch of photos inside it, and one of mine was in there.
Okay.
Mercury Lift was my very first album cover.
Really, dude, and that's still, like, I came in right as that record, like, the record was already assembled, but yeah, that's still to this day, like, one of my, I just love that layout. Just super sleek, simple, awesome. That's so cool.
So half the photos are Tom B, and the other half are my photos.
That's amazing.
And so
you flew out to Diecast.
So yeah, so in 2006, like 2 weeks after graduating, it was like the very first time I'd ever been asked to fly anywhere. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to be doing photos from now on and not design. And it's kind of just taken a life of its own since then. You know, like, there's so many bands that I got to work with, like in 2005 and 2006, that kind of like set the stage to get to do what I'm doing now. And so the timing was just right. You know, it just worked. And, you know, like, later on that year in August, like, Mastodon, like, I went on my very first tour. It was Mastodon and Converge in the Bronx. And, you know, I did a week. I mean, I knew Mastodon pretty well at that point because I did the photos for Blood Mountain, and you know, they live in Atlanta, I live in Birmingham. And so I would drive over and hang out with them. But, you know, to be on tour with them and Converge, like, for your very first tour ever was like, all right.
Mind-blowing.
You know, like, it's mind-blowing, but at the same time, like, I'm glad that my photos looked good because I had no idea why that I was there.
Right.
I mean, I love both of those bands, but it's kind of like I didn't deserve to be there.
Right. You felt like someone at some point made an error in inviting you.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, I went for fun. Like, I wasn't getting paid to do it, but I was just like, oh, I loved Converge. I still do. I just heard that new song today, and it's so good. But you know, and then it ended up being funny. Like, after that tour, like one of my first photos that ever became like publicly known were these live photos of Converge in '04 on the You Fail Me tour. And, you know, so when I was with Mastodon, like, you know, Converge remembered me from that. And I ended up doing the album photos for the record that was coming out at the end of '06. Oh, I forget what it's called.
No Heroes?
It was No Heroes.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of weird how, like, when you do, I'm so rambling, but whatever.
No. Well, I think I mean, you are rambling, but I think it's good because it's like people sometimes don't understand that it's like it totally is a domino effect where it's like once you get to know this person and then they trust you and they're like, yo, this guy's good, like he can take care of you for whatever you need, whether it's photography, whether it's record label, whatever. Your reputation does precede you, and if you're perceived in any way, shape, or form as being difficult or not cool, it's like, dude, it's so difficult to shake that with an independent music and like have people trust you if you do break someone's trust anywhere, from the smallest of bands to the largest of bands.
Yeah. I, you know, just like a quick whatever about that domino effect, like, you know, I predominantly think that the label I've worked for the most is Warner Brothers, whether it be like Warner Brothers proper or Atlantic. The only reason that I did any of it was because of Pelican. I messaged Pelican on MySpace and was like, hey, I love your band. This is like '05. I love your band. Is there anywhere I can like order stickers? And they were just like, oh, we don't have any, but we'll have some on our tour coming up. And they ended up looking at my photos and, you know, and so they were like, hey, do you want to come over to the show in Atlanta and shoot some stuff? I'm like, sure. I shot it. And I went out to dinner with them that day with a girl, and the girl was best friends with Mastodon. And she saw the photos, and she was like, oh, I'm going to tell them about you. And then so they told Mastodon. So I shot Mastodon and, you know, did for a couple of years. Mastodon's UK publicist is a girl named Emma. Emma also does Slayer and Taking Back Sunday. So I was, you know, when they needed a photo shoot for Terrorizer for Slayer, she was like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm like, of course, it's Slayer. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
right.
So I drove to Atlanta, did the Slayer shoot, and she was there in person because it was like for an album coming up, and Tom Araya was talking to her about Taking Back Sunday because apparently like his kids and himself are big Taking Back Sunday fans. This was like '06.
Wow, that just made my head explode right there. That's incredible.
It does, and they like the height of Louder Now, and so I heard him tell that to Emma. And then, like, a week later, after we got done with Slayer proofs and all that, I was like, hey, you know, like, I love Taking Back Sunday. I heard him tell you that you did that. You know, they're coming here. I would love to do some photos. And so they put me in touch with the manager, Jillian. And Jillian is, like, she's one of the best, and she's very hands-on with managing Taking Back Sunday. And so she personally went and looked at the photos and was like, I love it. Come do it. And, you know, ended up shooting... It was like Taking Back Sunday, Angels and Airwaves, Head Automatica, and the Subways. And I shot the show, you know, and that was like, you know, Taking Back Sunday is like one of the first like big bands that like I had like a real like ironclad, constantly touring with kind of thing. And so, you know, so basically you got to shoot one of your favorite bands, Taking Back Sunday, because you emailed Pelican asking them for stickers.
Yeah, dude, that's so... Yeah, I love that type of stuff because it's like you never... Especially this past, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, just for myself personally, there is a certain power to, like, saying yes, where it's like, you know, even though it may be something that you're scared of or whatever, where it's like, if you say yes to something, more often than not, something else will happen that's really random because you said yes, you know, 6 months ago or whatever. So it's like, yeah, that exact thing that you're talking about is totally... I mean, it's a really important point for people to understand that it's like whatever they're doing, and if they want to be successful at it, it's like the strangest of things can come from the most smallest of interactions, and so
Oh, I mean, it's insane.
yeah, that's awesome.
And a lot of people, like, when they email me, they ask me how did you do this? And I'm just like, like, I have not had a real job since the summer of '99. Like,
That's awesome.
and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Right, you're like,
There's definitely been times where it was scary and it was just like, oh my god, like, why am I in this boat? But like, when it's really hard to explain to somebody like how just coincidental it all is. And I think it's very coincidental. I also think that it's understanding how to work social media to your favor, of knowing how other people think and approach things. And so that way you can, like when I added Albert from Decibel, you make sure, like, your MySpace page, you made sure that it was on the info so that you don't have to click anything to see photos. So when he goes to your page, he immediately saw a really good photo. You have to, like, have that mentality of, like, I don't want to call it marketing because it's kind of like,
no, it's how you present yourself.
Yeah, and it's like, people try to do things a certain way and make it all cool and hipster and all that, and it's like, if the photos are good, the photos are good. And as long as you approach somebody and you let them know that you're down, like, and that you're not, the one thing that bands don't want to be are stepping stones. Like, nobody cares about you coming to shoot their band if you're just trying to shoot a bigger band that they're opening for. Mm-hmm. And like nobody wants that insincerity of, like, I've turned down photo shoots with big bands because I've hated the bands, and I just thought, like, all right, I can go shoot this band and make this much money, or I can not be a douche and be a little bit more broke. But like, why do you want to lie to somebody and, like, shoot photos of their band just to get you popular, And I definitely think that it's lying. Like, and every interview that I've ever done about this, and when I've talked about it online, the sincerity of, like, people who work for bands are always going to be the ones, the ones that have the sincerity are always going to be the ones that come out on top, because bands are not stupid. And as stupid as you think bands are, and as mismanaged as you may think they are, like, they definitely know how to smoke out people that are just along for the ride.
Yeah, totally.
And so I just, and it's, I don't know, like, I guess I'll tell this story because it's funny, and it's like, not that I was, like, officially offered, but, like, I got asked to go on tour with Justin Bieber, like, 2 years ago. And it wasn't because people loved my photos. It was because one of my friends worked there, like, okay, in a business that works on the tour stuff, and was just like, hey, like, you might get a phone call from a management guy about doing this tour. I just want to make sure you're down for doing it before I tell them, like, it's, like, between you and, like, 2 or 3 other guys that they want. And I told him no, like, I didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. Because it's kind of like, who knows how much money they make. It was like an Asian and European tour too. Oh, jeez. And like, there's no telling how much money. But at the same time, like, for me, like, I'm not good at lying to people. Like, I don't like it. And so I don't want to lie to somebody and shoot the photos of their band and be like, and act like I'm stoked for it when I know that I despise them,
Yeah. Well, it's just like, there's
not that I despise Justin Bieber, for if there's any Justin Bieber fans that are wanting to kill me right now.
Yeah, no.
There's a lot of Justin Bieber fans that listen to this podcast.
But. Yes, there's a huge crossover, but no, I think you identified where it's just like, there's a difference between obviously a job and a job that you're passionate about, and those are two completely separate things. And a lot of the times when you are involved in what we're involved in, it's, they are mutually exclusive. It's like, you can just walk into it and be like, yo, this is a job, I have to do this because I have to pay the rent, or whatever the case may be. but then I'm going to go back to the work that I normally feel passionate about. And like you said, you just don't want to, you don't want to misrepresent yourself and, sit there and lie to people's faces when it's just like, yeah, I don't understand what it is that you do.
You can't ever view things as it's going to last forever, because it's not. Like, that's the band mentality of bands that like keep playing like way past their prime.
Right.
If they're having fun, that's all that matters. When they're doing it and they're not having fun, but they have to do it to keep alive, I think that's when it gets iffy. But it's kind of like, like, you have to just make it. It has to be on your terms, and it's cool to know that like everything that you did and that you got, you did it all yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, people definitely were involved and like, hyped you up and all that kind of stuff, but like, there wasn't an agent, there wasn't anything. Like, you were just a dude who went out and shot photos, and people liked them, and that's how it went.
No, for sure. I wanted to touch on one last thing to sort of wrap it up. Just because, like I said, one of my first exposures to you outside of the photography work was that obviously the Nervous Engine stuff and
Nervous Energies.
Energies. I don't know why I call it engines. Nervous Energies.
No, it's.
That was born out of the just desire to obviously explore a different medium, and just because you obviously already knew so many bands that it was kind of like, hey, this is something cool that I can kind of capture a moment in time.
I like, literally, I was bored.
Yeah.
I was bored, and I was just like, all right, I don't talk about gear and interviews and stuff, but like, like the one thing that was like a big thing when I was doing stuff is I only shot film. So from 2000 to 2010, every photograph that anybody's ever seen is film. And so in 2010, I bought a digital camera because at that point, I was just like, I didn't care. Like, people always talk about the aesthetic of film, and I had been using it for so long that I just didn't care. Like, I wanted to try something new, and like in my mind, I'm like, all right, well, I don't really like digital photos, but maybe if I shoot digital photos, then like maybe that's what everybody needs, is me to show them how it's done with the digital camera, which is totally incorrect. Like, nobody cares.
Yeah.
But it has HD video on the camera that I got, and so, a friend of mine had recorded this EP, and she she loves to do like lo-fi recordings that sound like they're from like through a telephone or something. And I really liked it. And I was just like, man, like, I really love these songs. Why don't we like film them, and then I'll do the audio, and that way we can, not only do I get to have versions that don't sound like they're through a telephone, like, it'll be this funny thing that we put up. And I put it up, and it got like, it got like 500 views the first week, and I was just like, oh, that's insane. And so, the next week, Fake Problems was coming through. I'd already done photos with them before, and so I filmed them, put it up the next day. Like, all these news sites were covering it, and so I was just like, all right, maybe this is something I can do. I had actually already had the Nervous Energies domain name because I had tried to do this art project. And I was going to call it Nervous Energies, and it was stupid, so I didn't do it. And so I was like, all right, well, cool, I'll call this acoustic thing Nervous Energies. And it is crazy. Like, I don't, I don't have publicists. I do literally do, like, when I do a video, this is going to be so funny because people are going to be so mad. When I get a video, I upload it. I email Thomas at Absolute Punk, and I'm like, hey, man, I got a new video. You put it on the site? He puts it on the site, and then it explodes for the rest of the day. And that's it. Like, I don't send out a mass email to a bunch of labels and stuff. Like, Thomas is my guy. And so, I definitely give him huge credit for caring enough to put him up when I needed him to, back when nobody knew what it was.
Sure.
And not only that, I don't know who wrote the story at Alt Press about the Fake Problems one, but they've definitely been cool about posting about it as well. And so it's turned into like this weird thing.
Right. That you're
And
just like, well,
I'll tell you this. I keep joking about that I'm going to do this, and I may do it, and I don't know. I haven't decided. But I may shut it down in November.
okay,
At, like whenever the 2-year anniversary mark is.
sure. Just
For
like,
no reason. Like, I'm just like, it's kind of like I came up, I did this thing, it's gotten well over 2 million views in like a year and a half. And it's kind of funny to just, like, I don't know if I'm just trying to be funny.
if you're just like, well, I guess we'll just wrap it up. I've accomplished all I wanted to accomplish with this little thing that started.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally, I did it because I was bored. Like,
Yeah.
I did, and I don't consider myself really good at video stuff. I just think that I'm good at picking a spot that, like, bands can do their thing. And, like, I don't, not to, like, I'm rambling so much, but I don't care.
Right.
People, like, a lot of other, like, there's so many sessions now, and it's gotten ridiculous because it's like, now that there's so many sessions, like, bands want to do all of them on a tour, and it's like, why do you like that's stupid. Like, I get that you want to keep having all that press, but like, you're basically just going down, like, going down the ringer of having an acoustic video like uploaded every 2 weeks of your band. And I just, I don't think people care that much.
Yeah.
Except, some of the bigger bands, they do. But, like, there's so many of them now. And I was definitely not the first. Like, I think Daytrotter owns... They were not the first people to do sessions, obviously, because it's John Peel and stuff like that.
Right.
I think Daytrotter, as far as, like, independent music goes, like, outside of, like, BBC stuff, they were the ones who, like, own... Like, everybody is ripping Daytrotter off.
Of course.
Obviously, like, Daytrotter didn't do video in the beginning, but, like, so anybody who thinks they're doing something, like, just know you're ripping Daytrotter off.
Right. Sure. Well, that's, yeah, I mean, we've hit everything I wanted and more, Ryan. You are a very talkative gentleman, and I like that because usually I find myself doing not always, but I tend to talk a lot too. So you beat me, and that's a good thing.
I guess it's kind of like, I ramble, but at the same time, like, when I would not have done this interview if I didn't feel comfortable doing it.
Well, good.
And I'm not necessarily secretive, but, like, I'm so weird about doing stuff that I usually just don't, because I don't want to, like, I just think people don't care what I have to say.
Yeah.
And that may be very well true, but so when I do get the chance and I am comfortable, like, I feel like that I have stories that I should have been sharing the whole time.
Right. You're like, here, I will, like you said, when you do feel comfortable, you're like, yes, I can unleash this onto the world now, and this is an okay thing.